So now I'm here in Delhi talking to you because I'm in India suddenly for a week because a friend of mine, Chapul Mehra, offered me this opportunity to come and put up a show of his NGO in Hyderabad, and I thought to myself, why not? It was more for a way of working with friends rather than making money. And it wasn't even my pictures, there were pictures of my former students from NID. So I just did some design work on it, and we put it up and it was fine. And it's just allowed me to kind of be in touch. It's a bit difficult to maintain that close contact, by living elsewhere. So after this break, I think I left Delhi in 2012. I feel like maybe it's time to reconnect a little bit. And there's no immediate agenda about what project to make in the near future, but I thought just coming and going a bit, and doing some reconnecting might guide me in some direction. There's a little general on the side project of the street, which I've always done since I was very young. It's something I fall back on in the absence of other things. So I got this great little camera, and I wandered the streets in London or Paris, wherever I am. So I wandered the streets in Hyderabad and got some really nice pictures, I think. So, and talking about this street, last year I had a book published called Christopher Street. And there were a set of pictures that I'd shot in 1976, actually, when I was in New York, and I was in the middle of transitioning out of an MBA and into a kind of photography course. So I was there for a year, and it was a real eye-opener. There was a huge, I came to this place, and there was this huge photography scene happening, which I'd never seen before. Anywhere else I'd lived, which was Delhi and Montreal at that point. The 50 photo galleries and all of that, and the whole history of photography was on view. So at the same time, the 70s were a very exciting period in New York, because it was just after an exhibition called New Documents at MoMA, which featured Lee Friedlander, Diane Arbus, and Gary Winogrand, where rather loosely taken looking pictures of the street and people suddenly seemed viable in a museum context. So it was, to the casual viewer, that might look like, why are these here? And that's very informal, I'm seeing. So the street was like becoming this big subject. And the idea was that, especially in New York, every street was kind of photogenic in that sense. So I was both discovering, and in the same place, I was suddenly in the, I was in the place which was the subject, and also learning how to do it. So it automatically became my subject as well for that period. So I started taking different street corners to show difference, because in Manhattan, every street has a different ambiance. So I was comparing at one point Midtown with its towers, and then the garment workers district on 7th Avenue. And then finally with the Village, which is near where I lived, and had my other interest there, which was gay men. So gay men were coming out in their thousands, because we were now a bit after Stonewall and before AIDS. So everywhere you looked in the Village, there were gay men. So I just stood on the street, on Christopher Street, every weekend, and hundreds of gay men came by. And I thought, well, I can't have sex with all of them. I'm going to shoot them with my camera. So that's what I did. But then I was a fledgling student. So then the following year, I moved to England and went to proper art school to study photography, which I did for the next 5 years. And then in 83, I graduated with my MA and thought, in 84, chalo, now I'm starting my life as a proper trained photographer. So everything that came kind of before that was put away. So I never looked at these pictures again. So it's only now, at this later stage in life, where I've suddenly become aware that I have an archive, that it might be worth looking at it. And because it's all analog, obviously, so I have lots of files of negatives. So a process that actually started here in Delhi around 2010, we began scanning my archive. And I was a bit nervous about bringing it here. So I would bring one year at a time, and then we would scan some, and I take it back. And then I ended up back in London 2012, so then began scanning more earnestly. And essentially my focus suddenly shifted from, I thought, I don't actually need to take a lot more pictures because I have literally thousands of pictures that even I haven't seen going back to the 70s. So let's have a look at them. So I was just scanning, and I'm a bit of a DIY person in that typical photographic manner, like we don't work in teams, we work like alone, and we want to do everything and shoot and make the print and do everything. So same in this archive. So I was scanning, and then I make my own little website. I just like tinker with it and put things up. So I would scan and put on website, and it was anyway suddenly. So consequently, last year, the publisher rang up, first time ever in my life, to say, "I've seen your website, and let's do a book. What do you think?" I said, "I think it's marvelous. Make book." So we made a book so the book happened. Now, I've done books before, but they've been either sort of monographs or they've been books about other people's work, or I've been curating, so that's led to a book. I haven't really done like a photo book about a single subject that I've just shot, like that. So this was kind of newish experience, like new experience for me. So, so I was wondering, are they actually going to be able to sell this thing? So I found it a very painless experience, I have to say. Because I know, obviously, by now, quite a lot of people who are engaged in activities like this, and I've heard many stories, and there's a lot of anxiety around involving other people, typical photographer's anxiety. The minute there are more people, publishers and design. So yeah, going back to the book, then so they approached me, and this was all happening electronically, emails and websites and all that. I never set eyes on them. We chose the pictures. I had an assistant. We high-res scanned them between us and cleaned them up, and there were about 70 images at this point. They would send me versions of sequencing and design, and I would okay it. Fortunately, they chose a printing house not far from where I lived, so it became the point at which we met for the first time, was actually on the press. And so it was, so basically everything about the process was, from my point of view, was great. It didn't interfere with my life. I'm at a very busy period, and I didn't really have much to do after I'd cleaned up the negs, so other than spend half a day at the printing house. And so the book, Christopher Street, was printed in 1,000 copies by a British publisher called Stanley Barker, who were actually a young couple who specialized in photo books. And it was last November, so it's just a year old. They've only got 5 copies left. So from their point of view, it's done very well. And they booked to do 2 more, one next year and one the year after, again from the archives. So archives have become a significant part of my, let's call it research. This is my own archives, but also in general. So I've been involved part-time on and off over all these years with higher education. This is one of the things I do even just to pay my rent. So never full-time, but I've been in and out of it, both mostly in England, but sometimes here with NID I was going now and then. But in the last couple of years, it's become a little more serious. So again, in the now. So I'm now involved with 3 educational institutions. I'm a visiting tutor at the Royal College of Art, which means that they can just call me in to an MA photography program to do tutorials and crits. Then I'm actually lecturing weekly at Kingston University, just also in London, another MA photography course where I teach, which I lecture on theory and history. Third thing is that I've just been confirmed as a professorial fellow at the University for the Creative Arts, which means that although I'm tied to photography and a little bit of teaching at the MA level, I'm primarily being paid to create research opportunities for me and for the institution to create a kind of research study center and to bring in more staff and more. So my role is kind of to create a research center and to get funding for it, academic funding, and to create opportunities for fellow staff and also for postgraduate students within the university. And my topic is going to be an LGBT photo archive, because again the archive situation is coming to the foreground. And so in the UK, what it means is that I have to find partners in other institutions, which I have. So the proposal is to get 2 or 3 academic institutions to apply for larger sum of money, which goes to the school, and then the school in turn supports you over a period of time. So at the same time, I'm involved with another research center at the same place, UCA, which is on women in photography. So I think I'm the only guy in this. But so they've been doing a lot of activity, shows and symposiums and all of that, and it's heading for a big conference at the Tate soon. So something like that. And then I kind of now live in this world of graduate students, and it's very research-centric. And it's about finding, actually the big task that's facing me and my students is what is the right research question to ask. That's the most difficult thing. And how to then, just the methodologies of how to go about answering that research question. So I think for me that's always been the big difference between, say, what we do as art photography, because we ask, art photography basically asks, like other art forms, asks a question. Or perhaps art photography asks several questions. But other kinds of photography and design and the kind of work we do in the NGO world is actually trying to answer something. So it's more like a statement of fact. So that way, so I've actually come back in later life to my original question. I'm going to frame it as the whole thing as a series of questions, but actually mine haven't changed. So I started life thinking, what is an Indian gay man supposed to be? Because that's what I am, and nobody's telling me anything. How do I find out about it? How can I use the camera to find out about it? And that's what I did in 1970, and that's what I'm still doing. So there's a kind of continuity in my kind of searching questions, because there is no answer for it. And it depends on which decade you are, which geography you are, and so on, and it's evolving. So it's been quite an interesting journey, and it's for me now, so there's this research part. So the journey's not over, fortunately, because I've hit 66, and in order to maintain my connection to higher education, fortunately I'm in the right place in the UK, where they don't retire you forcibly. I've heard in other countries, neighboring countries, even in Europe and Ireland and places, at 65 they just say that's it. But where I am, I can keep going till I call it quits or I drop dead. So in order to keep it, to maintain my access, I had to do a PhD, because back in the day when I did an MA, that's as far as you could go. But nowadays, of course, there are practice-based PhDs and the like. And there's a growing number of people with PhDs. And then being a part-time academic means that sometimes every September I have to reapply, and they relook at your credentials. And many universities are now saying in the UK that to teach postgraduates, you need a PhD, even in art. So this is a new thing. So I got myself one for that purpose. People are wondering, why am I doing it now? Because all of my peers who also teach only have MAs. So then those who are in these full-time jobs and have been for the last decades or two, as long as they don't leave them, are kind of don't need to, because they're kind of secure in what they do. So for a while I was doing the PhD and doing this archival research and not really shooting very much. So this year, along with these 3 jobs, the shooting thing came up, so I took it. So somebody said, would I like to do a residency? And I hate doing them. I never do them. I'm not a residency kind of person. I can't imagine going somewhere brand new and doing something for a month. I wouldn't know what to do, because I think a lot of what I personally do is based on some degree of intimacy and knowledge and living with and around. You know, one reason why I keep coming back to Delhi is because it's hometown. It's very intimate. You know, if I walk on the streets, I feel part of the fabric. You know, I don't have to learn anything. So anyway, so this residency turned out to be right there where I was. So it's in London. I don't have to go anywhere. It's not even a residency in terms of the art center, because it's closed for refurbishment. So I'm just at home. Well, not literally. So the subject matter, though, involves one of our health trusts. So our hospitals are organized by health trusts. So I'll be based at Imperial College Health Trust in London, which covers 4 or 5 major hospitals. So the PhD I did was called Queer Migration. So it was based on 4 past exhibition projects. Went from Homelands up to Sun City. No, Homelands, Pre-Raphaelites, Sun City, and Beachmay, and Mr. Malhotra's party. And in it, I explored this idea around migration. So I emigrated from India in 1969. And I've always thought of migration, and one hears about migration stories, as a place you left behind. You know, so I never thought much about the place I arrived at. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even choose it. I was just, parents went, I was just sent there like baggage. You're also going, you know. But actually, what happened to me is that I left as an Indian, but I arrived and I found another identity. Indian identity in Canada in the 60s was useless. I had to dump it as quick as possible. Nobody was interested. Nobody had heard of the place. You know, when you're 15, and I was in this high school, no one knew where India was on the map. So instead, I found this other identity, and it was called gay, which was this thing that I did in India, but nobody called it anything. So I had this big sex life in India as a teenager, and I went to this other place where I thought all these white people didn't do this kind of thing. So I thought my sex life was over, and I discovered one day it's not. So being gay, so this, in a nutshell, then so being gay became very important and central. And to my work, as I said, so I made Christopher Street in that spirit of coming out and seeing all these gay men and so on. That was so in the 70s. I became very aware of the gay movement and the history and the gay liberation struggle and civil rights and all that in North America. And I didn't think about this Indian side at all. But in the 80s in England, when I graduated, I came into this post-colonial world where suddenly race was a big issue. So then it became like race was a big thing. Then I tried to bring the two things together. So then I had a bit of a problem, because a lot of black and Asian people that I meet in the West are kind of quite homophobic, let's say. So, whereas the gay people are kind of very racist by, let's say, even just by not knowing or by exclusion, but everywhere gay you went to was pretty white, basically. So, and then you're kind of like in the middle. So I tried to make work about being gay and Indian suddenly in the 80s. And I couldn't find a starting point because there was nothing in the books, so nobody talked about it. I couldn't find any pictures that could relate. So basically that kind of became my mission, to make something in art and photography around Indian gay men very specifically, and to somehow make them central to or available for some art historical discourse or discussion or findable in some way. And it's taken me 25 years, but I didn't make bodies of work, and they have now been collected by museums, so you will find them. So I feel that kind of objective, if you like, in my career has been fulfilled. So I could just stop now, in a sense, if that's what I was just doing. So So now what's going to happen with the residency? We'll go back to it. It's set in hospitals, basically. I had to choose between. There are 4 hospitals. They said, and I had meetings. I've been having meetings with the art people and the hospital people and me. We're trying to figure out what would work for everybody. So what I found is one of them, St. Mary's in Paddington, is a key AIDS hospital in London. It's where the AIDS treatment started, and it's still going 30 some odd years later. It still has an HIV clinic with users that go back, the survivors from 30 years ago. So I thought I'll work with them, and with another hospital, Charing Cross, which is where the NHS performs gender reassignment surgery. So between the two, I'm going to look at again what this sexuality means around through HIV and AIDS. I've been discussing with them what methodologies can be used. There are many constraints. These are hospitals, these are patients. There's a lot of confidentialities. They have to vet me properly, and I have to bring me into a system, to allow me access. So assuming it all goes ahead, so the method that I've suggested is something I experimented with in Sun City in Paris. So basically, I'm going to spend, so let's say it's over a 12-month period. I'm going to spend 7 months doing research. That's my golden new word. The research is going to be to gather as much information from the users, both at the HIV clinic and in the gender reassignment. And then spend the next 3 months in a kind of production where I'm going to write 1 or more scripts based on these testimonies. So we're going to create a kind of fiction, but based on what they say. And then, like shootable scripts, like Sun City, and then spend the last bit shooting them, these scenes, anywhere. So either in the hospitals, if it's not possible, in studios. And I'm going to offer the patient users the opportunity to participate in either the script writing and in the production like this, so they could either be sound, if we have sound, or lighting, or camera, or anything. I don't have to operate anything. I'm happy for them to be, and then either be in front of or behind the camera. And then if nobody wants to be, then we'll just get actors. In 2000, I made I researched making a 30-minute video piece about HIV in India. I'd been hearing about Africa a lot in living in London, and I thought we weren't hearing about India. So the video piece was part of an exhibition that was both stills and video, and the stills were the landscape, so that's why the conceit of it was that the person making it was HIV infected. So because it's at such a micro level, it's a cellular thing. So I argue that it's it's all over me, and my eyes are HIV. My eyes look at an HIV world because they're looking through the virus at the outside. So everything I look at is through that kind of lens. Anyway, then I thought I'll go to research what's happening in HIV in India and treat it as a kind of personal journey, this coming home kind of stereotypical plot, but kind of intersperse it again with this factual stuff. So what you saw was the last very personal bit. So my original plan was to find my alter ego. My very ambitious plan was to find somebody my age in Delhi who was gay, who never left Delhi, because I'd left, you see, but the many had not, and who was also positive. And I wanted to know what their story would be like compared to my story, living in the West. So I did find somebody. There was so much stigma at the time here that the person was very afraid to appear in any kind of media. And so I thought I'd persuaded him to actually appear in front of a video camera. I traded myself in exchange. So anything to get him in front. And he did agree. So we started videoing, and he had a breakdown right in front of the camera because the fear of the stigma in Discovery was so huge that even though we were just two of us in the space and we'd become fairly intimate, not had sex, but quite close. So I just contrast that with someone like me coming from where I was, from London, because from this huge background of gay activism and AIDS and all of that, I was like relatively fearless. I would announce to everyone. People had to hold me back. People said, don't announce. We're going to my mom's house for dinner. Do not announce. So like that, we were like quite opposite. So anyway, so I said to him, okay, let's just have the audio. Don't appear. So we had the audio, but then he said, when he heard it, he said, oh, everybody knows it's me. That very Indian Delhi way, like people think everybody knows who they are, because if they're not networks, then they're nobody. But if there's somebody, then you have to be somebody. It was a stupid tautology. I said, who's going to know? Like in that gallery world. Anyway, couldn't. So I was just left. Then the last thing was, let's just have the text. I had gone. So then I had this larger, broader visual of my journey back. So not just to Delhi, but to this village in UP where my dad comes from, where I'd always been taken to. So I have these vague and some not so vague memories from forever of this train journey from Old Delhi station to this place called Shahjahanpur, an overnight thing where you arrive at 4 a.m. I remember middle of the night you have to get off this train. It stops for 2 minutes. And then being taken to relatives' houses in these rickshaws, and they all wake up, and there's a huge thing. Anyway, and then going from there to the interior. So then I had I'd filmed sections of this place, Shahjahanpur, which is a town, and then we go further into the interior. So then you go on a road leading towards Pilibhit. I don't know if you know the landscape. And then off that Pilibhit road, 3 villages in is where we really come from. And so I went there and I shot that landscape. And I set all of this to wonderful Bollywood songs, which were saying things like, talking about coming out in a way about something, or not coming out. And then giving some very depressing facts and figures about India that were from the time, the data, and contrasting it. Because the thing that really shocked me in India was at the time is that, if anybody died in England, it would be news and you would know. So, but here, we didn't know. It seemed like people were dying of AIDS and we didn't know who they were. Nobody was making a record. So, for example, I interviewed a doctor in Jaipur. who's in charge of some hospital, and he said, when people test positive, we don't tell them, we just send them back to the village. Kyunki kya karenge unke saath? There was no treatment, So why tell them? I mean, because they actually die of TB or something else anyway. So I thought this is like pretty deep. They're just like, nobody knows what the casualty rate really is. So that kind of thing. And then the hospital thing, so I've always had this issue, with Indian and gay, and then now with Indian HIV, it was even worse about stigma and nobody wants to appear in front of the camera except me, so then I'm appearing in front of the camera. So I had this very painful procedure. I didn't anticipate just how bad it was going to be. My lungs fill up with fluid and they have to be extracted. This time it had happened around the heart, which was a more complicated and painful thing. And so I'd come out of this procedure. It started here actually. It started when I shot that movie, because it's part of my ambitious research. I'd gone to health centers in Shahjahanpur, and where actually there were, and I felt I couldn't shoot it because I thought it'd be too exposing. Again, they have to have their confidentiality. But so basically, a hospital in Shahjahanpur means patients are on staircases, patients are here, there, and everywhere. There are no barriers. So everybody's germs is anybody's germs, So my doctor was really freaking out that I was in India, they don't like me to come here because of the germs. And then I was in these medical places which were not properly sealed off from each other. Or it might have just been that shot of the train. So I was just hanging out of in India you can open the door. So I was just hanging out of the train. That probably wasn't the smartest thing to do in my case. So ever since then, there's been this pleurisy thing in my lungs. It comes every now and then, and they just extract it. So that's not so bad. The heart thing was much worse. So then I got someone to shoot me while I was recovering, and there was this. What they do is they leave you with it's like a reverse drip, except that one was 24 hours long, and the tube was coming out of my heart. So it was I was a bit bothered by it. I was quite bothered because there was this attachment, and I thought it was rather short. And I thought, what if it falls off the bed? And it was just a bottle they pull out like this, like pulling a wire out. Anyway, so I just gave the camera to somebody to shoot some video. And I don't know if you remember, but the person was seriously amateur. So they couldn't fit it this way, they did it that way, and they tried it that way, and they were trying to, and they kept kind of, so it's all over the place, but I thought I'll just use it anyway. And it's very emotional, and so I just show that last bit often because it's enough, and people often don't know what to say after that, because I'm also then just standing in front of them. So this time my plan is to be less documentary. When I made the video, it was kind of documentary-ish. Everything was like really happening kind of thing. This time it's going to be the opposite. It cannot be documentary for confidentiality reasons, so it has to be artificial. Everything will be very artificial, constructed. Sets, people, everything. Nobody will. So it'll be more cinematic. And my plan is to make very voluptuous, appealing, large color prints, seductive. I don't know what's going to be in it because I have to hear what they're going to tell me. But I imagine it'll be about long-term surviving, about coping with your sexuality and the way it's changed, because you've now got several decades and attitudes have been changing. Meanwhile, you're getting older, because I not only have all this, but now I've got an old person's problem. People look at me and think, senior citizen hai ji, So I have to say, nay, but I have a sex life. Please get over it, You're supposed to sit in the corner and mind your own business like poor granny in the house. But she may still want to be like, Hannah, so like that. This one certainly does. And my patients will want to, I bet they're going to be like, because people, so then it's got to be sexy, because they might be 60, but they're hanging in there, so it'll be like it, but not like it at all also.